Hello and thank you for joining today's webinar in which I'm really excited to be launching a new product. We are really excited to bring to you Connection Center for Webhooks Inbound, which is all about making SCOM the center of your universe, bringing in all the data from all your other monitoring tools into SCOM using the power of webhooks. So let's dig in a bit. But before we do, let's just say hello quickly. So I'm Bruce Cullen. I'm the Director of Products here at Cookdown, and I have a special guest with me.
Hello, I'm Nathan Foreman. I'm the Solutions Architect. And while Bruce is running the slides, I will be on the chat. So if you get questions that come up during this, feel free to send them over. And of course, as always, we'll have Q&A at the end of this webinar.
It will be nice to not just be by myself on one of these and to have some help with the demo and stuff too, which is always good. So let's dig in. So before we kind of dig into what's new, these slides, these next two slides, I presented back in June when we launched Connection Center. And we were saying that back then, since the existence of Cookdown, since 2019, we've been all about integrating SCOM with ServiceNow. We've been doing it for a long old time, and it's a very mature integration. And back in June, when I showed this slide, we moved from just doing this to also integrating with a bunch of other tools. So now we don't just integrate with ITSM tools like ServiceNow, we also integrate with messaging platforms like Slack and Teams, and of course Sharewell as well. At this point, we introduced webhooks in the outbound capacity. So this is the ability to send alerts from SCOM into other platforms via webhooks. But you'll see that there's nothing to the left of my SCOM logo here. Everything that we're talking about is essentially pushing stuff from SCOM into other places, rather than completing the vision for Connection Center, which is to make SCOM the center of your universe. And that's only possible if we get a bunch of stuff into SCOM as well. And this was Connection Center back then. So looking at webhooks more specifically, obviously, you know, there are loads of places where you can send data using webhooks, from messaging platforms such as Everbridge and Twilio, through to automation platforms like Azure Logic Apps and ticketing systems like BMC. There are many sort of flavors of BMC that can receive webhooks messages, and Azure DevOps. But today, it's with great pleasure that I introduce the other side of this picture, getting things into SCOM using webhooks. Now, these platforms are just a sample of the sorts of platforms that support webhooks outbound. But there's some really, really obvious choices in here, things like SolarWinds and AppDynamics and VMware with VROps, but also some of the more kind of unusual tools to come across in the context of monitoring, like OpenShift, Prometheus, and WhatsApp Gold, completing the whole vision for Connection Center, where SCOM truly can be the center of your world. So I think before we move into how does this thing work, is this really a problem? It's a really big question, and we've been trying to answer this over the course of years. Why get alerts into any central system? Well, the answer is really, really straightforward. Companies have got many, many monitoring tools, and the alerts in each of these tools look entirely different from each other. So there's no kind of uniformity or consistent approach or look and feel. So bringing them together is a sort of sensible thing to do. This matter is complicated by the fact that each of these tools has a different way of visualizing or consuming these alerts. So you end up with, if you're looking at dashboards, multiple dashboards. If you're looking at notification-based consumption of these alerts, you know, you might have something that sends things in Teams, one that sends them in Slack, and different email formats. So it's a bit of a mess, that's why. But how much of a problem is this really? Well, back in January of this year, SCOMathon, which Cookdown is a sponsor of, did the Big SCOM survey. And one of the questions that we asked was, what other tools do you use for monitoring? Now, this slide I actually stole from a recent coffee break that I did on getting alerts into SCOM, because it's entirely relevant here as well. And you can see there's a large list of monitoring tools right here. And they range from, you know, really obvious ones like SolarWinds to weird and wonderful, and just to illustrate how weird and wonderful, I dug into this other line here. And what we found was some things that I'd never even heard of. Also scripts. I'm surprised scripts wasn't sort of higher up the list. So basically, it's a very fragmented landscape, and there are lots of monitoring tools out there. So clearly, the need for a single thing rather than multiple things as a way of consuming your alerts is valuable. Other thing to highlight is that this survey had 118 respondents, and only 6 of those respondents used SCOM only. And there were 296 responses to this question, which clearly says that most people have more than one monitoring tool. In fact, on average, companies have 2.6 monitoring tools on top of SCOM. That is a lot of monitoring toolage right there. Right. Bringing those tools together is super valuable, because otherwise, you've got up to sort of 3.6 or 3 or 4, depending on which way you round up or down.
Yeah. There's people on top and on bottom of that number if it's an average. So.
Oh, yes. Places in which you can check alerts, basically. So clearly there is a need for this. The other important question to answer is, well, why SCOM? Any one of these monitoring tools, in theory, could be the center of your universe. But what makes SCOM really ideal for this tool? Again, this slide is from a recent coffee break, which I literally reused because it's all entirely relevant here. The first big reason is SCOM has really good coverage. There's less to integrate into SCOM versus other systems because SCOM's very widely deployed and is very mature. Its agents are on the vast majority of your infrastructure already. It's a very mature system, which means that it is everywhere, both in industry, but also in terms of infrastructure coverage, which is great. It has a really strong community with vendors like ourselves, and there are many other vendors out there that do many other things for SCOM as well. And to my mind, the big reasons are these next few. It's really easy to extend. Management packs basically let you import anything you like, which is a really valuable piece of functionality when it comes to any monitoring tool. It is also very flexible. The data you can get into SCOM doesn't have to fit a certain shape or pattern or form, which means that you can use it for more or less everything. And because it's been around for so long, there's a large element of familiarity with the tool. People are very familiar with how to get data into SCOM to know that they can do this and use it in this way. So hopefully I've convinced you that SCOM is the right way to go. And obviously with Connection Center, Webhooks Inbound, we can bring all the alerts for these other tools into SCOM. And best of all, we can do this without requiring anyone write any code, because we've
Except for me.
Exactly. So except for us here at Kickdown, we've written lots of code to make this possible. Indeed. So yes, we've done all the hard work, so you don't have to. So I think the next thing really to do is to dig into a demo. And in this demo, we're going to be, well, unsurprisingly, raising alerts from Webhooks, which is one of the 2 features of this release. So in this case, we're going to be using Prometheus and obviously Connection Center. With Prometheus, we'll be sending webhooks across to SCOM, to Connection Center, and from those webhooks, we'll be raising alerts. Really straightforward idea and concept, but really, really powerful. So I guess without further ado there, Nathan, I will hand over to you for a demo.
Perfect. Thank you, Bruce. Okay, so we've got our SCOM instance here on 19, and of course, like all Cookdown products, this runs from 2012 R2 up to 19, so we haven't excluded anyone, even if you haven't kept up with the latest URs. However, we would recommend you keep up with them, but we won't hold you to that. Mm-hmm. So once you have the Connection Center Management Pack installed, you'll see you've got a couple new items here in the admin pane, and we're going to do inbound notifications, since today it's all about getting that alert inbound. Mm-hmm. And the main focus of this alert integration is simplicity. We were looking for a way to get those alerts so that your operations team can see everything in one console here, and we don't want you to have to do a lot of work if you don't need to. So you just go up, add connection, and we're going to create a listening webhook. And so you'll see the first question it asks me here is like, well, what are we listening to? We're going to create one for Prometheus. And you'll see it creates a little URL down here where we'll be listening for those inbound webhooks. It's not set up in our lab today, but it is worth mentioning that both authentication via API key and HTTPS with SSL are supported. Mm-hmm. So if your environment requires no unsecured connections, Cookdown and Connection Center can meet that.
And just to say that those settings are elsewhere, which is why you're not seeing settings relating to that in this wizard. They're sort of global settings. But yeah, it's a really vital piece of functionality when it comes to security.
And then you're assuming you're going to get a JSON payload, and there's an option to put a sample in. But like most people, I don't have a memorized Prometheus sample. So I'm just going to leave this with this generic message. And the same for the alert. I think today's we'll do a medium alert for warning. We'll just do a simple alert. And I'm going to leave this description blank as well because I don't know what we're getting in from Prometheus.
So how will we shape what we're going to be raising in SCOM? How will that work?
So that'll be the exciting second adventure as we support a technology called Liquid.
Ooh.
And after I send in a test event, we'll be able to reopen this wizard and dynamically map out all the text in that description.
Nice. Looking forward to seeing that.
Perfect. And then you also have the choice to dynamically map all the custom fields. Mm-hmm. Again, for this example, we may come back and look at them later, but now I just don't know what the Prometheus alert looks like off the top of my head, so I'm going to leave those as blank. And you'll get prompted, where do you want to store it? All of this configuration is stored in a management pack. So if you set it up on your test environment, it becomes very easy to move over to production, as well as very easy to version if you use a tool for that. Mm-hmm. Then at the end here, it's just going to give us a summary of what this wizard has done. It'll generate one here. Just a couple notes on what happens next, and then when you click finish, it'll take a second, and this will just pop up with a new listening connection here. And it does use the regular SCOM configuration and everything, so it will take a couple minutes to become active. And we'll just watch for that to come active here in just a moment.
So what's actually happening here while we're waiting for this to become active?
So we've created a discovery that is going to discover a listening endpoint, which essentially we're discovering a class in SCOM for, hey, I want to listen for and transform events from Prometheus. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're waiting for the SCOM engine to find that discovery and discover the class instance.
Makes sense.
And then once it does, we should see this change to green because it has a heartbeat that comes in to say, hey, I'm listening for your event. It comes in every 5 minutes. And if that heartbeat is missing, of course, we change it to red so that you know you don't have visibility to Prometheus.
So it's not just a case of the discovery itself we're waiting for, but also we're monitoring the connection the listener will be discovering. So if things go awry in 6 months' time, you'll be able to see it.
Correct. And it will raise an alert for you in the alerts pane to say your connection to Prometheus is no longer listening, is no longer healthy, and we'll give you a couple steps to get that back up.
Perfect.
Let me hit refresh here on the console a couple times, and it should show up soon. And it looks like our connection's just turned green here to indicate that it's listening.
Good news.
So I'll have Bruce go step and generate an alert for us, break something here quick.
There we go. One of my specialities is breaking things.
Perfect. And now if we go over to the Alerts tab in SCOM, in a few moments we should see a new alert pop up here that matches the description we had put in, which, to be honest, this is pretty useless. It's a start that it says something happened in Prometheus, but not helpful at all. But here's where the magic we had referenced earlier comes in. If we go back to this connection, click Modify, you'll see it actually has detected that we have the payload here from the last received use. So you can...
useful, yes.
Yeah, exactly. You can go in and just be like, oh, perfect. And then we can kind of glance through here and say, oh, we probably want maybe the alert name, and then there's an annotations, description, and summary. Those sound pretty good. So we'll go through to alert settings here. And now when we go in here, if we go new alert from Prometheus, Liquid uses a double curly bracket, and it would be alerts. And we have documentation on all of this.
So Liquid, just while you're typing this, lets you basically pull the parameters from the payload received and lets you dot walk the objects received if there are multiples, which means you can dynamically populate things from the webhook, which is really, really valuable.
Exactly. So you can see I'll type in like summary here, and I'll put in the one I'd copied from description, and you'll see in real time as I type it out, once it matches the dot walk of the property, it pulls it through in there to the alert. And just for an example, let's pull the summary again to use in a custom field. Unless you've got something you can think of here.
What have we got?
Fingerprint, I guess, if you use the Prometheus system. Personally, I'm not extremely familiar with it, but I could see that being useful.
Yeah.
So let's do that one. A great way to test, too, is in this UI. If we just go in here and put in the fingerprint, you'll see it's not under annotations, but it is.
All the more reason to test it. There you go.
Yep, perfect. You can see it's got not really a GUID, but a set of characters under there. So we'll take that, and let's put our fingerprint in custom field 1 for this demo.
So the great reason behind populating these custom fields is if you use these custom fields for routing, or you have SCOM connected with some other system like an ITSM tool, you can use all of that data there too, which is really valuable.
Exactly. And then so this discovery we had talked about previously has now been updated, and we just need to wait for it to discover that class instance again with our new mapping settings. And in a couple moments that'll come through and we'll send another test alert. So let me pull up the logs here on another screen just to watch for that 1210 as you'd normally be used to.
So the 1210 is the event ID of when an updated configuration is received, essentially.
Exactly, yeah. It's the standard. Since we use all of SCOM's native behavior, luckily your troubleshooting skills from any previous SCOM issues like the 1210 and stuff will come into play here as well. Okay. So I've seen the event log, and it looks like our new configuration is active.
Good stuff.
We'll step over to Prometheus here and kick off that event again. And if we go over to the alerts pane, we'll hit refresh a couple times till a new one pops up, because there's our old one with the less than helpful description. But here's a new one now, and you can even see custom field 1 has that alert fingerprint, as they referred to it. And down in the alert description, we've got summary, ensure entire alerting pipeline is functional, which is correct. So this is a test alert from Prometheus. And then the description. So those were dynamically populated.
Looks good to me. I've just realized we actually forgot to change the name. Can we change the name as well in the setup?
Yes, good catch, Bruce. It's just a simple step in the wizard. There's an option to pick the alert name you'd like. So anything related to Prometheus, and you just set that, and it's quick.
Perfect. Awesome. So hopefully you can see the value there. That didn't take very long at all. It was a couple of minutes, basically, bar waiting for discoveries to fire, unusual SCOM stuff that happens to connect to a whole other system. No code was written.
Yep. Yeah, it breaks down into about 3 or 4 steps, depending on how you count them. So you go in, you just go through the wizard once. In step 2, you send a sample alert. Step 3, you re-go through the wizard, and you're done. The optional 4th step, of course, is to test your liquid mapping, depending on your confidence level there. But
yeah, always better to test, I guess.
Yeah, before you get the high priority incident that just has nothing in it. So, but yeah, 4 easy steps and maybe 10 minutes, depending on how quick your config churn is, and you're ready to receive near real-time alerts from Prometheus.
Amazing. So hopefully this will be sort of game-changing for anyone looking to connect another system into SCOM. But that's not all that we have to show you in today's webinar.
Yeah, let me pass you back the slides here.
Thank you. So that isn't all we have to show you today. So we've shown you so far raising alerts from Inbound Webhooks. The other thing that's possible is to raise events from webhooks. Now, under the covers in SCOM, whenever we receive a webhook, we're raising an event, and from that event, we're raising an alert. But as you can see, it's relatively sort of static in that when a webhook is received, an event is raised and an alert is raised in all cases. So where a webhook is received and you don't want an alert, you have no choice. But if you fall back just to what we essentially call the advanced option, which is to use events, we have other options available to us. So in this case, the basic premise of the next piece of our demo and functionality is the same in that we're still using Prometheus to send across data via webhooks into SCOM, received via Connection Center. Except this time we're raising events. So no alerts, just events. But we will build some custom monitoring in the form of a monitor that will consume these events and will change color based on the contents of those events and raise alerts accordingly as well. So in this case, in what's on screen here, I have an event that has triggered my monitor to go red and to raise an alert. And if I send a second event through, I can change the color of my monitor to green, healthy, and to close off that alert. So in other words, any capability of SCOM natively, you can now hook up to the events that you're sending in from your external systems. We're going to now see a demo of this. So I hand the keyboard and power back to you, Nathan.
Perfect, thank you. So here we are back at the console. And as Bruce had mentioned, they are all events under the covers. And so if we look here, we've got a critical one. But before I dive into that, for those of you familiar with authoring for SCOM, you'll know that events have a bunch of built-in workflows, things like 2-state, 3-state, repeated event, missing event, and all of those now open up to you when we expose the events through the advanced UI. So I'll show you the status here. And this is something we got feedback from one of our beta partners that said, you know, it'd be really helpful to actually just have a state, open, closed, red, green. Like, oh, cool, we can expose the raw event and do that. So on this one, you'll see there's actually in Health Explorer, there's a Prometheus system alerts, which is still red from our earlier test. If I expand it out there, there's the state change events. And Prometheus uses the terms alert firing and alert resolved. If we go and have Bruce unbreak what he had previously broken for our test, should see that come in maybe 15, 20 seconds. Luckily, it's fairly quick. And if we just click okay, quicker than that, which is unusual for SCOM, but great to see.
The one-time SCOM is quick. Happy days.
Yeah, perfect. And if you go in, you can actually see then under the alert firing and alert resolved, the raw data received as well as the raw JSON. So here's the event description and all of that. And now we've got a state that you can bubble up to your SCOM dashboard or your squared up dashboard as needed. And it is an advanced option, but before we make it sound like too much work, it is also something in the UI. It isn't fully driven through registry or something. There is still no code. And we'll dive into this on a later webinar because there is a bunch of cool stuff. And if you're interested, please let us know in the chat or hit us up at hello@cookdown.com, and we'll make sure to let you know when that future webinar is taking place.
Sounds good. The gist is to configure events inbound. It's a very similar process to configuring alerts inbound, as we showed you. There are a few more kind of bells and whistles, and then on top of whatever you bring in the form of events, you have to layer on all of SCOM's native abilities, so monitors, etc. But it's a really cool piece of functionality that will let you go beyond simply raising alerts, but it does take a bit more setup essentially on your part because you have to understand how to author in SCOM.
Yeah, and you need to know what you want to call as a good alert and what you want to call as a failing alert. And there's just a couple questions we couldn't assume for you, but they aren't too bad to do. I'll pass it back to you, Bruce. That's all I have to show in the console here.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Nathan. Great to see it in action. And if you like what you've seen here today, if you go to cookdown.com/connection center, you can take a trial, book a demo, and of course, ask us anything. Connection Center for Webhooks Inbound is now live. So if you're interested, we are very interested in showing you how it works and letting you have a play with it in your own environment, because there's no substitute ultimately for having a play, is there? And that's very important. So thank you very much for watching. If there are any questions, we'll now turn it over to Q&A, which we'll take via the chat function of Livestorm. So if you have any questions, please fire them away there now, and we'll take them.
Sounds good. Looking forward to hearing from all of you on the chat.
Perfect. And if there are no questions, let's just say thank you very much for watching today's webinar.
Thank you.